operant conditioning, which is the learning that occurs from reinforcement. So later you might see a question like, learning cannot occur without, and what word would go in the blank space? Learning cannot occur without reinforcement. That's right. So say it all together. Learning cannot occur without. There you go. So you should all ace that question on the quiz. Hopefully. Okay, we have types of consequences. I've alluded to this a few times. We have things that increase the likelihood that behavior will occur again in the future. We have things that will decrease the likelihood that behavior will occur again in the future. And we can do those by adding things to the environment or taking things away from the environment. Okay, so today we're mostly going to talk about positive reinforcement in isolation from everything else on this table. So positive reinforcement is when we do what? Add something to the environment so that the behavior is likely to occur again in the future, right? So it's a myth that people think that we punish a behavior to make it stop right then and there. That may be helpful in the moment, but generally it's actually to prevent the behavior from occurring again in the future. The behavior has already occurred there. So positive reinforcement is what we do to make sure that it continues to show up time and time again, right? So that brings us to, what is a reinforcer? It's a fancy definition here. It's on maybe your flashcards. It is a stimulus change that increases the future frequency of the behavior that it immediately follows. So reinforcement works much better if that reinforcer is like immediate to the behavior. Okay. If there's a delay, it can still help, but it's going to be less effective. So anybody been in a classroom where the teacher's like, if you're good all week, then you can dig out of the treasure box on Friday. Yeah, that is it. Why would that be a terrible plan? You might forget. Well, let's think about it for the student. I gotta wait till Friday. I gotta be good every day of the week. And on Friday, if I'm good every day, I gotta pull out of the treasure box. It's what? It's not immediate. And so what could happen? What if you have a shitty day on Monday, right? I'm not going to the treasure box on Friday. It's Monday. So I'm going to act a fool all week. And I'm going to love it. Because it doesn't matter. I've already lost my opportunity for a reward. So unless I'm like giving a reward on Monday for the behavior that occurs on Monday, anything else that's like long-term from that is just not going to be as helpful. We like to have fun words, right? And make up our own nonsense words on your flashcards. But the other thing is we like to make up our own symbols. So this is the stimulus. S is for stimulus. R is for reinforcement. So sometimes in your book, it might show it to look like this. All right. Important. A reinforcer is always defined by its function. So if it increases behavior, it is a reinforcer. So function, right? Attention, escape, access to a tangible, or automatic reinforcement. So we're always going to define a reinforcer based on that functional piece of it. So in ABA, we also like to be really picky about how we talk about behavior. And so this can help us too in a lot of our just conversations, right? It's not that the person is bad. It's that the behavior, we might not like the behavior that that person is doing, right? So we can externalize it. It's not that the kid is bad. It's that the behavior is bad, if you will, right? So to reinforce, or the act of strengthening a behavior. So we could say, I reinforced joke telling by laughing, or we could say, I reinforced him for joke telling. Which do we think is better? First one. Why? Says the function, absolutely, Seth. Exactly. We reinforce behavior, we don't reinforce people. Colloquially, we generally will slip up and say, I reinforced him or I reinforced her for doing X, when really we're talking about the behavior that that person was engaging in. All right, so reinforcement is also the process by which a behavior is strengthened or the operation of providing reinforcers. So other ways we can say that is I arranged for reinforcement to occur, or the behavior was strengthened through reinforcement, or I provided him reinforcement for jumping. Which one is right? Second one. Yeah. So we're always going to talk about it, not like I, me, you, they, but like the behavior and then what occurs after. All right. So that one's right. We can say I arranged for reinforcement to occur because you probably did set it up, right? You set up your token economy. You can say this one, but we're for sure not saying the last one. Okay. All right. All right, so different ways to classify reinforcement, not just by function. Let's get a little fancier here. So let's talk about unconditioned reinforcers. So from reading, what is an unconditioned reinforcer? Okay, so what does that mean in simple words? Yeah, an instinct. So what might be an unconditioned reinforcer? But what's in here? It's not just the act of drinking, because I would say alcohol might be a conditioned reinforcer. Yeah, no, alcohol might be a conditioned reinforcer, but that's not what's in here, unfortunately. No, so water. Were you judging?
No.
It's almost noon. At 11 a.m. while you're teaching a class, drinking alcohol. Yeah. Yes, that would be a questionable behavior. Absolutely. Water would be one. What else? Food.
Like closing your eyes with the light, so you can stay more the light.
Yeah. So any sort of reflex, we'll lump all those together. Somebody said air. You said air? Is that you? Breathing. So, but like, what are you breathing in? So oxygen's the reinforcer. Anything else? That's it. Just escape. Food,
Alcohol.
air, water, not alcohol. That is a conditioned reinforcer. What about like the need to be sheltered? You don't have to learn that that's a need. That's just like, I mean, you can learn, but like everybody's born in this world knowing, oh, it's raining. I should probably, go undercover. Animals do it. Yeah. What else? We're going to go reflexes, escape from pain. There's one big one. Nobody wants to say it. Sex. Yeah. Huh? Nobody wants to talk about it, but that is an unconditioned reinforcement. These are also considered primary reinforcers. So oftentimes we will pair one of these with a secondary reinforcer to teach that the secondary reinforcer is reinforcing. We'll explain that more here just in a second. I would also say sleep would be an unconditioned reinforcer. Most people, like, you can't live without sleep. So conditioned reinforcers are then the opposite, right? So Any examples of these? Money. That's right, Jazz. Money. Money is definitely a learned or conditioned reinforcer. It's the big one, and it's the best one because it can get you literally any reinforcer that you and your heart desires. So this is learned. We aren't born knowing that this thing is reinforcing, right? So you think about little kids, they don't know that money is required to buy things. And generally, we pair these things over and over and over again with those unconditioned reinforcers for us to learn that this new thing is reinforcing, right? So like with money, I'm going to go buy food. I'm going to pay my rent. I'm going to pay, so like I'm getting shelter, I'm getting food. I'm getting all of the things. I could literally use money to buy all of those unconditioned reinforcement. But everything and every interaction or every tangible item in the world at some point could function as a reinforcer in any specific moment based on the circumstance, right? But this also is that not everything is reinforcing for every behavior, is likely to reinforce every behavior because everybody is a little bit different. Their interests are a little bit different. So praise and clapping and being really excited for doing something might work for one student, and it might actually do the opposite for another student. So we have to be kind of mindful of that. All right. Generalized conditioned reinforcers are essentially stimuli associated with many other reinforcers. So money is a big one. Tokens in a token economy is another big one. And so as a result, that reinforcement is relatively free from current motivations. So a token and money are things that I could offer to you, and regardless of what you're currently needing, that should work for you because it can get you all of the things. And I just explained to you why money is such a powerful reinforcer. Any other thoughts there on why money is helpful? I mean, you can buy all the things, if you have enough money. That becomes a separate issue.
Do it.
You guys all remember this, right?
Do it. Mom, mommy, mom. Ma, mom, mommy, mama. What? Hi.
I love that. All right. So what is occurring in that scenario? Like what just happened? Which behavior? What was he doing? Yeah, he was repetitively calling her by name, right? Mom, mommy, mom, right? So she reinforced repeatedly calling for her. Is that the only reinforcement at play? Only his behavior was reinforced. Did she do anything? What'd she do? She yelled, "What?" Right? Okay. So what happened after she yelled what? Stopped. It went away. So is anybody else reinforced in that scenario? Yeah, so her saying what was reinforced by the behavior stopping, which is actually negative reinforcement. Another motto, not in today's quiz, but another motto behaviorists like to say is negative reinforcement makes the world go round. You all think that it's positive reinforcement and praise matters. No, avoiding things we don't like actually changes behavior pretty fast. And so oftentimes what happens in this scenario is it's actually the negative reinforcement for the parent that is maintaining that whole interaction and not really her attention for his behavior. Her being negatively reinforced for saying what by him going away, that is what will continue the cycle of that behavior chain for much longer than him getting attention. Because until you stop her from saying what, he'll always do it as long as he needs to, because he knows that she will eventually say what and give him attention. We're going to do it so much more on Tuesday, but negative reinforcement is essentially when we remove something annoying or aversive to reinforce it. How is she reinforced? This is because everybody thinks that negative reinforcement is punishment. And negative reinforcement is not bad. It is actually good. We like negative reinforcement. Whoever here said the reflex thing with you close your eyes, Bree, right? When it's bright, like if you walk outside and close your eyes, that's negative reinforcement. So every time you walk outside and it's bright outside, you're more likely to close your eyes so that you avoid that pain. That's negative reinforcement. You get in the car and it's beeping at you to put your seatbelt on, and you buckle your seatbelt to get it to stop beeping at you. Or my other personal favorite, you guys ever been in like Zoom calls right during the whole pandemic and somebody in the class had the smoke detector battery low, and it's just like beeping constantly in the background? So changing those batteries would make that stop. So then your behavior for changing batteries is reinforced because then the beeping stops. All of those are prime examples of why we might do something to avoid things. But negative reinforcement is a much harder thing to if I'm trying to get behavior to stop and going in and punishing it when we've been negatively reinforced, when our behavior has been negatively reinforced for so long, it is a lot harder to make change. So every parent in the checkout line at any store and their kid throws down on the floor because they want a candy bar, you think that it's the kid getting the bar of candy for tantruming that's the reward. And it is, and it absolutely still is positive reinforcement. But now the parent is no longer facing the public shame and embarrassment of other people watching them let their child tantrum on the floor. So in that situation, with those of you without kids, you just look away. I see nothing, nothing's happening. And that way that parent feels much more at ease ignoring their child throw a fit on the floor. It's always helpful when the grandma-like parent or grandmother-like figure walks over and just offers to give the kid the thing that you're denying the kid. Just give attention to it. No, that's not going to solve this. Taking my child out to the car and spanking them will also not solve this. We'll talk more about that later. All right, so let's talk about how behavior is selected through reinforcement for Stewie. Okay, so or in general, but she wasn't on the phone. But like you're on the phone with your child around you, right? Your child was fine, playing independently, doing nothing to bother you. And as soon as that phone rings and you're like, hey, yeah, and your back is now turned and you were not available to give attention, that child is then going to engage in some problem behaviors, right? So this one is yelling mom. This one is hitting mom. And this one is crying. All right, so which one of these behaviors appears to be the most likely to get mom's attention? Yelling mom, right? Yeah. Yeah, because it's high, right? So this is like frequency, total number of times. Mom then is like, what do you want? What do you need? Stop. I'm on the phone. Don't do this. I'm on the phone. Shh. All of that, by the way, is attention, even though you feel like it's punishment. So it's reinforcing. So anything like that. So yelling mom, but what this tells me too is that she is doing a much better job of ignoring the crying and the hitting. So those haven't been selected out. But what do you think will happen if she starts ignoring the child yelling, mom? You think it'll immediately, like she's going to start ignoring this and it's going to immediately fall off?
No.
More frequent. It's going to skyrocket first. Absolutely. Why? Yes, exactly. I'm going to always try it. This works all the time. And then what happens as we grow that behavior? What do you think is likely to happen to these behaviors? Say it loud and proud. They will increase too. Yeah, they will likely increase too. And then what do we hope happens? She continues to ignore the behavior. And as long as she continues 100% of the time to ignore those behaviors, they should immediately drop off after you have that spike. Now, the problem is one day she's going to have a bad day and she's going to try to ignore. She's going to try her hardest, and then a 40-minute mark instead of the 30-minute mark, she gives it. And now we've intensified and strengthened that behavior.
Do you really have a champion of ignoring your kids, like to keep them from doing stuff like this?
No,
I
no,
don't think this is a problem.
no, nobody is. And so the answer is you have to tell yourself in this moment, can I ignore this behavior today? To the end. To the end. And if the answer is no, you cannot, then you reinforce right here. Right here. Actually, I'm like right here. You actually just reinforce right here. As early as possible. Okay. And the reason why is it's much less intense right here. And if I'm going to accidentally reinforce it today, I want to reinforce this little level where it's kind of like mom. Yes. Huh? Yeah, shh. Don't tell people that because it makes them feel really bad about themselves. This is exactly the same for all living organisms that have central nervous system. Rats, mice, dogs, cats, people. Brittany.
When you
Extinguish.
extinguish, well, I was thinking extinction first.
Yes, so that is the extinction burst. Look at you applying what you've learned at your job and school. It helps, yeah. All right, so this is also, like, notice it was kind of going down, it's pretty level, and then at this point, she has now decided she's going to ignore her name. So that's going to be our extinction burst, okay? So this is our baseline data. We'll call it baseline. And then now we're ignoring mom. And as we predicted, it dropped momentarily, but it came right back on up. That's our extinction burst. Some of these other behaviors came up and down. These stayed low. And then now the mom is ignoring both, saying mom and crying. And so, okay, sorry, let's select it out, crying. So. Didn't say as well, because this should have continued to go up and then drop. Let's claim it dropped really fast, and then crying increases. Now we've decided to stop it. We're gonna ignore crying and saying her name, so those both drop down here, and then hitting comes out. And so that's how we select out those behaviors, assuming she's not actively doing that ignoring of all of those other things as well. So you can select out behaviors. The goal would be to just ignore all of it until we're calm and maybe tapping on the shoulder. Hey, Mom. And then you can have cues like, hey, wait a second, I'm on the phone. I'll help you in just a second. All right. We're going to talk a lot more about extinction bursts later too. So for those of you who don't feel like you're there yet, that is not on today's quiz, and that will be discussed next week. All right. So going back to this, what is a reinforcer, right? So it's the immediately follows piece, right? And so we're going to talk about how immediate is immediate. Like how immediate does it need to be? And this is the last topic for today before we get into the quiz. And I'm doing this in small increments because there's a lot of information. And if I like inundated you with all of reinforcement on one day, you're going to come back on Tuesday and be like, I don't remember it. And so then I did not create learning because you're not creating. All right. So, or your behavior is not reinforced. So it's critical that the consequence is delivered immediately following the target response. Or is it critical that the consequence is delivered immediately following the target response? Yes or no? Yes. What might happen if it's not delivered immediately following the response? Yeah, so other behaviors might occur during the delay. So what might you accidentally do? You might reinforce a behavior you're not trying to reinforce. And that's especially true. Dogs are really bad at this. They're very superstitious creatures. I don't know if any of you have ever had a dog or tried to do and engage in dog training. But if they do not get an immediate reinforcer, they will scroll through a large repertoire of behaviors. And then if you're then giving a reinforcer, even though you meant to reinforce like this other behavior. So if I'm teaching the dog to sit and they sit, and then I'm like, oh crap, I gotta go grab some treats. And now they're like sitting, and then they stand back up, and then they spin in a circle, and then they sit back down, and then I give them the treat. Now every time I tell them to sit, they're gonna, spin in a circle and then sit. So you gotta be really careful. It happens to humans too. Anybody think of an example in human behavior? Brittany. Oh yeah, it's a superstitious behavior too, to think that, you've seen like, and there's an episode of Friends. This is my first Friends reference of the semester. So, but the lurkers at the casino when they go to Las Vegas, right? And they'll wait until you leave. Yeah, that's not related to the reinforcement here, but I just like to talk about lurkers in casinos who wait, see it happen, no reinforcement occurring out of that machine. And then somebody gives up and leaves because their behavior has not been reinforced. And then that other person jumps in, and then that person is almost immediately reinforced. But yes, other behaviors can occur. Things like, I'm trying to think, mostly superstitious behaviors are things that are created from this. Like is the best example to give that affects others. So if you ever like your team's losing and then you like stand up and leave the room and then they score a touchdown while you're out of the room. And then you immediately come back into the room. I'm going to watch this play. And then they start losing again. Because then they like recall the touchdown because it really didn't count or whatever. And then, so then what's been reinforced there? Being out of the room, that had nothing to do with any, like your presence in the room had nothing to do with what was going on in that game. But now you've been accidentally reinforced. Yes.
You know how when we were potty training, and really excited and they would in the toilet, and then they like. And like, have you ever heard of like the baby bringing? Like, if it was in the blood, and there's whatever, and what you do to the parents. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I feel like I've heard that so many times from people, it's like, oh, they don't know that they're being reinforced, like, get rid of it, and it's just like.
Yes, I could see that where it's like, because it's not just because they pooped in the toilet, but rather that like the poop occurred.
Yeah, and they're like, I've
Yeah,
heard of like, a few different people, like, telling something similar, he was like, talk to them, or they like, did it in the wrong place. They're like, "Okay, did it," you know?
oh, I could see that. That would actually be not necessarily with a delay in reinforcement, but an overgeneralization of the reinforcement. So like sometimes, I think I gave this example earlier on in the semester, sometimes like little kids are learning that this furry animal right here is a dog. And if a kid only lives in a house with a dog, they might accidentally overgeneralize that all furry animals are called dog, right? And so every time they see a furry animal, even if it's a cat or a rabbit, they're going to label it as a dog. That's kind of more of what you're explaining, is that this overgeneralization where maybe they weren't able to discriminate exactly what the stimulus was. And I'm now using big words that nobody understands. And that's what I was trying to avoid today. So we'll talk a lot about discrimination later as we move through this, but the moral of the story today is reinforcers are what happens when we want to increase the future likelihood of behavior. Okay. So people get tripped up on the word positive and negative as meaning good and bad. And I'm going to need you to take those thoughts and I need you to throw them away. Okay. Positive and negative, when we talk about reinforcement and punishment, are not about things that are good or bad. Okay. It's just plus and minus. It's adding and subtracting. It's really, they should have just called it added reinforcement and subtracted reinforcement. And I think we all would have been like, oh, but for some reason, this positive, negative terminology and semantics, everybody gets caught up on the fact that positive means good and negative means bad. But in science, in math, it doesn't, right? It just talks about whether or not that number has been added or subtracted. Reinforcement is to increase the future likelihood of behavior. And then say it one more time with me. Negative reinforcement is not punishment, and learning cannot occur without. Y'all, you're so smart already. That's it. The semester's over. You all passed. Good job. Just kidding. Just kidding. Let's do a quiz. Yes. Yeah, you are welcome. You have to stay the whole time and hang out with us.